All right, welcome everybody. It was brought to my attention yesterday that there is a famous rabbi being accused of some inappropriate conduct. So I figured we would talk about that today. And it just so happens the woman that made the accusation, it turns out I'm subscribed to her channel. So I didn't really recognize her, but at least at some point in history, I saw some video that she made that I agreed with and subscribed to her channel. But I don't remember what it was. Like I said, I don't recognize her. It turns out from the video that she made, she's a convert. So I'm very supportive of converts. That could have been what attracted me to her original video. So the rabbi in question, I don't want to name him, even though everybody knows who he is, because I don't want to be spreading things that might not be true. So you guys know I'm good friends with another famous rabbi who gets accused of lots of things, and I don't want you to think I'm talking about him. So I'll just say this rabbi that we're discussing today has the same first name as me, Yosef. And when you convert to Judaism, you get to pick a Hebrew name, and that's why I chose the name Yosef, so that going forward, I would always be reminded of this rabbi who's now being accused of things. So, other than that, I've never met him. I emailed him once for a source of something that he claimed in one of his shiurim, and he emailed me back and he gave me the source. So I've never met him in person. I've never had a conversation with him. He's done some things unrelated to this, which I kind of disagreed with, but I've never met a person in my life where there was nothing that I disagreed with. So on this specific rabbi, he has affiliations with other people that I have real problems with, but they are separate from him. So I'm looking at this as two people that I've never met in person. And I want to be fair to both of them. I don't think either one is right or wrong by default. Um, Also, my friend, who's also a rabbi, he's been accused of things. And I said at that time, I think the accusers are definitely bad actors. I don't believe the accusations. And I said at the time, if there's no proof, then the accusation should not be repeated. Why are we spreading this if it's slander? If there's no proof to it, then you shouldn't be spreading this kind of stuff. So how do I talk about this situation with Rabbi Yosef so and so when I just said when my friend was accused of something that it should not be talked about without evidence? So I think the way to do it is it has to be constructive. It has to be something that we can learn from. Otherwise, we're just spreading gossip. All right. Gossip is rechilut. This is very frowned upon. Lashon hara is negative speech that is true. We shouldn't be spreading that if it is true. There's exceptions to that. According to Rambam, it's not considered lashon hara if it's already been spoken about publicly. Now, by publicly, he means in front of three people. The Chafetz Chaim says publicly means in front of 10 people. It's all over the internet. There's more than 10 people in the comment section, so it's already considered public. So the first metric to say this doesn't count as lashon hara is has it already been spoken about publicly, meaning everybody knows about it anyway? Yes. The second metric is are you speaking with malice? Am I saying anything negative against either party involved? And I'm going to do my best to not do that. In fact, I'm going to try to defend both parties. So I'm not speaking with malice against either one. So according to Rambam, if it's been spoken about in front of three people and you're not speaking with malice, it's not lashon hara. So don't let anybody tell you you're not allowed to speak about it. Chafetz Chaim says it's not lashon hara if it's been spoken about in front of 10 people. You're not speaking with malice. He adds another condition. You must also, if you're going to speak about it, provide a solution to the problem that you're complaining about. So I'm going to try to provide a solution to that. What's solution? Well, it depends on what you consider the problem. Is there problems in the marriage now? Potentially, although I don't know. Maybe not. A lot of people have had accusations and the marriage survives. They don't believe the accusers. So I'm not a marriage counselor. So the problem that I saw in the comment section was there's people attacking this woman who made the accusations. How dare you say anything? You knew what you were doing. You knew how men behave. Therefore, the problem is you. You wanted this. You should have known better. And I'll just remind you the woman is a convert. And to cause anguish to a convert, even verbally, which includes a comment section on the internet that she's going to read, transgresses multiple Torah commandments. So think about that before you start attacking the person who's already going through pain. Whether, there's two sides to every story. I've heard her side. I have not heard the other side from the rabbi that was accused. So I don't know which side is true. But the reason she's telling her side, whether her side is true or not, is because she feels hurt. She's already dealing with the situation that she's in pain. So would you, if you were a police officer and somebody came into the police officer to file a report, you would take the report. Would you start attacking the person who's telling the story that she's a victim of something? So I think we should keep that in mind, that not only does this person feel like a victim, she's also a convert. So I think it's wrong for us to start attacking her. There's other people attacking the rabbi, which I think at this point, we have an accusation. We don't have a conviction by a bet din. So it's just an allegation at this point. So my position on this is that it's an unverified accusation. And in Judaism, we do not draw conclusions based on online claims. Until a matter is ruled on by a competent authority or verified with admissible evidence, which so far we have not seen, then we are obligated to withhold judgment and avoid spreading it. Even if something were later proven true, the way we discuss it must still follow halakhic rules of speech. At this stage, it is a rumor, not a confirmed matter of halakha. So the status of this claim right now, it's a video claim by one woman. Later, perhaps other people will make other claims. Perhaps other evidence will be presented. But this video was just released yesterday. So at this time, other evidence has not been presented yet. So there's been no bet din ruling, no legal case, no corroborated evidence. Therefore, it's a halakhic rumor in halakhic terms, it's a rumor, not an established fact. It's an allegation only. Lashon hara, negative speech that is true, applies if something is true. If it's not true, then it's motzi shemra, it's slander. So lashon hara applies if something is true, and even more so when it's unverified. We don't form conclusions from social media videos. Judgment belongs to a bet din, a competent authority, not viewers. There's obviously the court of opinion, which is what we're finding in the comment section. And that's why we have laws about lashon hara, so that people are not convicted in a court of public opinion. It's there to protect people from being shamed. Shaming somebody publicly is akin to murder. It doesn't mean that you literally murdered them, but this is how severe of a sin this is considered. Shaming somebody publicly is just as bad as murdering somebody. So it's something we need to take seriously. And because it's social media, you're allowed to type. Oftentimes people think, okay, well, I should be allowed to, but it's a very serious violation. This woman is a convert. Mistreating a convert is also a very serious crime. I would encourage everybody to read Bava Metzia 59b. I've done, I think, 2 videos on it. It's on my channel. Even just verbally causing anguish to a convert transgresses multiple Torah prohibitions. If all the gates to heaven are closed, the cries of the convert will still be heard. Meaning, no matter how serious you think your prayer is getting to Hashem, if he decides, nope, the doors are closed today, he will still hear the cries of a convert. So you don't want to be the one that caused that convert to make the prayer that Hashem is going to listen to because of how you made them feel. So I think it's something we need to. I think it's something we need to take seriously. Um, so if somebody asks you, have you heard about the accusation? All of you have heard about it. It's public knowledge. So I think that's the right answer, is that it's an unverified accusation. I'm not calling the woman a liar. I'm not taking sides. I have heard about it, and I think we should say it's an unverified accusation. You know, a lot of our law in America is based off of Talmudic halakha, Sanhedrin rulings, how we behave as landlords, as tenants. All of this comes from the Talmud, and this concept that you're innocent until proven guilty has roots in this. So we don't allow assuming guilt or innocence without evidence and a proper process. So I think speculation is prohibited because it creates judgment without justice. You know, sometimes people tell the truth, sometimes people lie, sometimes people mix the two, but judgment is not based on the psychology of motives. It's based on proof and process or legal ruling. And until we have that process and legal ruling, I don't think we should be judging either side. So even if something might be true, halakha prohibits us from spreading allegations before they are verified. Maybe is not a license to publicize. It's already been publicized. We are not the ones that recorded the video. We didn't release it. So now that it is public, how do we deal with it? I'm not saying we should be silent on it. We're not allowed to talk about it, because if you're covering things up, then does that mean somebody got away with it? So Judaism never forbids reporting credible evidence to proper authorities. What Judaism forbids is trial by gossip. Reporting and spreading rumors are different things. There have been cases, unfortunately, where rabbis have been caught abusing children. People have literally walked into a mikveh and seen horrific things being done to a child by a rabbi. To be clear, that's not the accusation that we're discussing here. I'm just saying that in those cases, there have been rabbis who have been caught doing things to children, and they said, you can't turn me in. It's lashon hara. You would be guilty of turning me in to non-Jewish authorities. And because of that, people stayed silent, and they were wrong for doing so. Whenever there is a victim involved, especially a victim when there is a crime involved, you have an obligation to do something about that. I'm not saying this woman is a victim. I'm not saying that she's not. I'm saying that you can't let the threat of lashon hara prevent you from doing what's right. So there's a Talmudic concept that if you are showing mercy to the one that's committing the crime, and I don't want to punish the guy. He's a nice guy, he feels bad about it. We need to show mercy to him. Then you're not giving justice to the victim. So we need to keep that in mind. If it later turns out to be true, can we talk about it more then? Well, if something is later established by a bet din or a legal ruling, then the halakhic conversation changes to how we respond to a proven sin, not how we treat a rumor. We deal with their things only at their correct stage. And later, more evidence might come out, but right now, it's claims um, that are still just claims at this point. So, what about warning people? Are we allowed to warn people? Yes, in case something is true. In the example that I brought up, where children were being abused, if your children are going to this yeshiva and there's an accusation like that, I don't think you need to wait until there's been a conviction to say, I don't want my children in a place where there is potential harm that can be caused. So I think you're allowed to talk about that for warning people, um, but not just for spreading rumors. In the comment section there's people defending the rabbi, saying that Rabbi Shmuley Boteach and Rabbi Manis Friedman sent this woman to make false accusations to attack him. Now we're dragging in two other rabbis, which were not even involved. Now we're bringing their name in and potentially slandering them. If you're not involved with this rabbi, then what is the threat to you? So I think we should keep that in mind. But that is another element of where you should not let lashon hara silence you. If there's a credible threat, yes, you're allowed to warn people who are in danger. That's not the same thing as publicly shaming them, creating a viral video to get views. There has to be real constructive purpose to what you're warning. And that's the purpose that I'm trying to convey here is how we behave. Keep that in mind. Just because people are talking about it doesn't mean we should jump on the bandwagon, try and figure out who's right and be on their side so we're on the winning team. If you just look at that comment section, you'll see there's people on both sides misbehaving. So I think we should just be mindful of that, what we say about the situation. Let's not jump to conclusions. Let's try not to slander either party. I have nothing against either party. I'm not going to be on the side of either party yet. And truth be told, it has nothing to do with me. I don't know either one of these individuals personally, but unrelated issues that have been on the forefront for me is I see how people are treating other people, and I see how people are looking at that. I see how Jews are treating other Jews, and it's absolutely indefensible. And I see how non-Jews are looking at the conversation, and they're correct to have a problem with what they're seeing. So I think that's what we need to correct is our behavior. So on this topic, I think that's what we should have in mind. If we're discussing something like this, um, we need to prevent harm. We need to not shame people and just speak to those who need to know. And that does not apply to viral shaming. I don't go viral, which is good. That's the way I want it to be. If I do, for whatever reason, my purpose of doing this, as I think I've articulated, is not to shame either party. It's to try and provide guidance for how we should be behaving. So, what is our obligation in this matter? I think right now is to withhold judgment. Let's wait for a competent ruling. If one occurs, um, don't substitute social media for bet din or actual law. So there's a statement in the Talmud that I refer to. When I see people misbehaving, when I see people doing things that are wrong, I'll tell you, we have an obligation to speak up. So you might criticize what I'm saying now and say, well, didn't you say silence is agreement? Does that mean you're defending? One individual, if you remain silent on it, I don't think so at this stage of the process. Um, Silence at this stage is defending due process, not defending an individual. We don't accuse people without proof, and we don't acquit without proof. So at this point, all we have is an accusation. So I'll say the same thing that I said when my friend was accused of behaving inappropriately. If there's proof, okay, then that should be dealt with. But if there's not any proof, then the accusation should not be repeated. I'm not saying that she doesn't have a right to make accusations. I'm not calling her a liar. But I'm saying we, as witnesses observing the accusation, I don't think we should be spreading it if we haven't seen any proof. But that doesn't mean I'm telling her to stay silent. That doesn't mean I'm telling her not to provide proof, not to seek justice. This is why we have actual courts. So that's my opinion on it. Now, some things that I think do apply to this specific situation. She says that she was told concubines are allowed in Judaism. Is that even true? Historically, concubines did exist in Tanakh. Practically, Rambam forbids this entirely in post-Torah halacha. So Rambam would say no, it's not allowed. Normative halacha today does not permit a concubine arrangement. So what does that mean by normative halacha? There's different opinions. People will paskin and hold by different things. Um, in general, Ashkenazim don't allow it. The Sephardic view is that, if one Ashkenazi rabbi says it's not allowed, he doesn't speak for us. So are there people that disagree with Rambam? Yes. And I'm going to read you a couple of those sources. As a Rambamist myself, um, I tend to agree with him most of the time, but we are allowed to disagree, and I'm going to show you the opinions of some people who disagree. So that they would say, yes, a concubine, pelegesh, is not prohibited by halacha. There are opinions who feel that way. The rabbi in question obviously supports those opinions. However, I would say if your opinion is to follow one of the rabbis who says that this is allowed halakhically, I would say certainly not with a convert in the process of converting. So even on the basis of halakha, the claim, if true, would reflect a misuse of Torah, and that is not a normative pesach. So that would be a huge, huge problem. So let's get into, I want to show you two sources here. The first one's going to be Hilchot Ishut, chapter 1, halacha 4, laws of marriages. So Rambam says here, before the Torah was given, when a man would meet a woman in the marketplace, and he and she desire, means both parties are entering into this relationship consensually. He could give her a payment. He could engage in relationships and relations with her wherever they desired and then depart. Such a woman is referred to as a harlot. Again, this was before the Torah was given. This was the ways of the people. And this is, well, let me read you the opinions on this. Okay, so we all understand men, women, consensual relationship. We're not dealing with a commitment, a marriage. That's what we're talking about so far. So let me just read that again. This is Rambam speaking here. Before the Torah was given, when a man and woman would meet in the marketplace and he and she desired, he could give her a payment, engage in relations with her wherever they desired, and then depart. Such a woman is referred to as a harlot. The Rava, now, let me just continue reading. When the Torah was given, relations with a harlot became forbidden. As Deuteronomy 23:18 states, there shall not be a harlot among the children of Israel. Therefore, a person who has relations with a woman for the sake of lust, without kiddushin, receives lashes as prescribed by the Torah because he had relations with a harlot. So according to Rambam, this is prohibited. It's not allowed. And she mentions this in the accusation. A harlot should not be found among the women of Israel. And this is why Rambam says, yes, it used to happen. It's prohibited now. It's not allowed. There are people who disagree with Rambam. So now I read you the halacha word for word. Now I'm going to show you the commentary of people who disagree with Rambam. The Ravad and others, I think Ramban is among the others, that differ. They maintain that a woman is not considered to be a harlot unless she is a professional prostitute. The difference between this approach and Rambam's involves only the severity of the prohibition. Both agree that sexual relations outside of the context of marriage are forbidden. With regard to a pelegesh, a concubine, a woman one designates as a sexual partner, but who is not consecrated as a wife. Okay, so I'm not calling the woman a professional prostitute. So Ravad and Ramban, I think they would say you're not a prostitute unless you're a professional prostitute. So therefore, you're not in the category of harlot. So if you were a concubine, you're not a harlot, but they agree. Sex outside of marriage is considered wrong. Rambam says, I don't care what you call it. A harlot, it's not allowed. You're not allowed to do this. So there are some rabbis who say a concubine today is allowed. It's not prohibited. But I think if you're going to take that position, um, it has to be done a certain way. I think the wife needs to be aware of it. You know, there were rules about this when it was common practice. There were rules that you had to treat them all fairly. You had to be able to provide a place for each of them. In this accusation, an apartment was provided, but you had to treat them all fairly. You couldn't you couldn't be with one more often than the other. You couldn't have a favorite and neglect the others. So you had to treat them all the same. So you couldn't go to your wife who wants to have relations with you and tell her, I can't because I was with you yesterday. I have two concubines. I have to be with them before I can be with you again. I can't show favoritism. I have to be with all of them equally. That means the wife was aware of the situation. So this is a situation where you're going to say, okay, we poskin like concubines are allowed. You have to provide their own space. You can't force the wife to watch you with your concubine. Okay. But the wife also has to be aware. So if this is a situation where the wife did not know about it, this is going on secretly, which could be, now was she aware of the money that was being changing hands to provide the apartment. I have no idea, but you can't cherry pick and say, okay, well, I hold like this, so I'm gonna take the parts that fit my advantage. I provided an apartment. I treated them all fairly, um, but then you're gonna ignore the parts that don't fit your narrative. You're gonna ignore the parts that say it can't be a secret. Everyone has to be consensual. It has to be an agreement. So I think that's gonna play a role in it. But I'm not on that bet, Dean. I'm just telling you halakhically, normative halakha, most people say this is not allowed today. Even the Torah seems to say, okay, in those days, at those times, yes, it was allowed, tolerated, but not ideal. When you look at the problems between Sarah and Ishmael's mother, the jealousy, even family separation, Ishmael being sent away. Yeah, Hagar. Yeah, I think it presents it as not the ideal way to be. I think monogamy is ideal. Look, in times of war, when most of the women have been killed, I mean, most of the men have been killed, is monogamy possible? That's going to be a whole generation of women not allowed to have children. So I think there's examples where it makes sense to be allowed for certain circumstances. Um, but I don't think we can confuse this with adultery. Adultery is a crime. So this is where I think we have to have clarity on the situation, which is clarity that I don't think any of us have. I think the two parties involved, the rabbi and the woman, uh, I've heard one side of the story. I have not heard the other. You guys know I'm very big. There's on teaching. There's two sides to every story, and there's some truth to both sides. And it's usually not one side's 51% correct, the other side is 49. It's usually more 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, whatever. But we haven't heard both sides, but I think we need to just keep in mind there is a difference between when concubines were normative, which in this generation they are not. There are some people who say it is allowed, but that does not mean there's no restrictions whatsoever. And I don't know enough about this case to say where it falls. Is it adultery? Is it how these individuals poskim? I don't know. So the other source I want to read to you is Hilchot Malachim, Laws of Kings, chapter 1. Um, is it? No, that might be the wrong source. Hold on. Hilchot Ishut, chapter 1, Halakha 4 is what I just read you. The other source I want to go to is Hilchot Malachim, Laws of Kings, chapter 4, Halakha 4. Similarly, he may take wives and concubines from the entire territory of Eretz Israel. When it says he may take wives, who are we referring to? We're reading Laws of Kings. So we're talking about a king, not your average person. A rabbi is not a king. So let's just be clear about that. We're referring to kings. He may take wives and concubines from the entire territory of Eretz Israel. The term wives implies women who were married with a ketubah and kiddushin. Concubines, women who were not given a ketubah and kiddushin. With the act of yichud alone, the king acquires her, relations with her are permitted to him. a commoner is forbidden to have a concubine. The only similar relationship is the union with a Hebrew maidservant after she has been designated by her master. The king may make the concubines, which he takes to his place, to his palace, cooks, bakers, perfumers. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers. Okay, so let's deal with this last part real quick. According to Rambam, halacha is that a commoner is forbidden to have a concubine. All right, this last part, you can basically, it's not applicable. The only similar relationship is a union with a Hebrew maidservant after she has been designated by her master. Does this apply today? Obviously not. So that's not the situation. Halacha is what it is. We don't have servants, slaves, so all of this language we can just do away with, is not applicable. The main takeaway from this halacha is a commoner is forbidden to have a concubine. Now let's look at the commentary to that statement. This statement is disputed by many authorities, including the Ravad and Ramban. The Rambam cites a number of examples of righteous men, Caleb, Gideon, who possessed concubines, though they did not serve as kings. There is a historical precedent for it. Okay. The Kesef Mishnah, which is written by Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, the Kesef Mishnah is his attempt to find a source for everything Rambam says in Mishnah Torah. He doesn't always achieve that goal. Sometimes he says, I think this is the source. Sometimes he says it's questionable because Rambam is obviously talking about this source, but why doesn't he mention this, that, or the other? Okay, so the Kesef Mishnah tries to resolve these incidents with Rambam's opinion, explaining that these women may have been female maid servants, which is something that we don't have today. So that's why this whole second half of this halakha is not applicable today. We don't have female maid servants. So the halakha, according to Rambam, is if you're not a king, you're a commoner. It's forbidden. You're not allowed. Now, there's people that disagree with Rambam, as we mentioned. All right, so let's go back to the beginning of this halakha, because there's commentary here that I want to point out. So I'll read it again, and I'll break from the halakha to go to the commentary. So the actual halakha, as I stated, similarly, he may take wives and concubines from the entire territory of Eretz Israel. The term wives implies women who were married with a ketubah and a kiddushin. Concubines are women who were not given a ketubah and kiddushin. Now let's see what the commentary says about that. This definition is a point of controversy in Jewish law. Rashi, in his commentary on Genesis 25:6, interprets concubines as having been consecrated to their men with kiddushin, but having agreed to live without a ketubah. Accordingly, a marriage bond has been established, and relations with other men would be considered adultery. The Rambam does not accept this view and designates a king's concubines with a unique status in Jewish law. On one hand, she is not married. On the other hand, a relationship between her and the king has been established to the point where she can no longer engage in relations with other men. Okay, so Rambam is saying the king is allowed to have a wife. The king is also allowed to have a concubine. That concubine is not his wife, but she is not allowed to go out and have relations with other men. She's not allowed to be with the king and also other men. That's considered adultery. So Rambam is saying that this is a situation that the commoner is not allowed to have. No concubines, no pelegesh. So if this situation, if you're going to say, okay, but there's people that disagree with Rambam, there's people that say we're allowed to have a concubine today. Okay, is that woman guilty of adultery if that woman has a relationship with another man. I don't know all the details of this situation, um, but that's something to consider. Did the wife know about it? If it in fact happened at all, if it's a true accusation, if the wife was aware about it, was this woman now like a wife without a ketubah, meaning that this relationship ends? He doesn't have to, she give her a get. These are details that at this point has not been disclosed. Okay, so let's continue. Concubines are women who were not giving a ketubah and kiddushin with the act of yichud alone. Literally, yichud means to single out or designate. Um, Rambam maintains that the king establishes his bond with one of his concubines by designating her as his. Halakhically, the term yichud means entering a private room where sexual relations could be carried out. Other commentaries maintain that the king must follow this practice in order to acquire his concubine. The king acquires her, and relations with her are permitted to him. Generally, sexual relations are not permitted without kiddushin. In Hilchot Ishut 1:4, which is the first one we read, the Rambam writes, anyone who has relations with a woman with an immoral intent without kiddushin should be lashed according to Torah law. An exception is made for a king. He may have relations with his concubines, though he has not consecrated them as wives. The king is allowed. According to Rambam, it's not allowed if you're not a king. So this is where Rambam would consider this an act of lust. A wife and another woman is the other woman is an act outside of marriage, especially if the wife doesn't know about it. So Rambam says this should not happen at all. If you're going to disagree with him and say it's not limited to just kings that are allowed to do this, we, the commoners, are allowed to do it, then that doesn't mean you can go lust after other women and no, it's allowed because adultery is still a sin. So these are things to consider. Um, a commoner is forbidden to have a concubine, which we already discussed. So just don't let somebody tell you, well, there are people who paskin that it is allowed. There are people who do paskin that way, but that is not a license to misbehave and act immorally. So I think it's an extremely small amount of the population that actually paskins that this is allowed. And when they do, I don't know any personally, but I imagine it's more like, the Mormons have this situation with sister wives, Muslims that have multiple wives. I don't think they're hiding it, keeping it a secret. I don't think they're shamed if anyone finds out that they have more than one wife. I think that's the general way that it would go. But again, I don't know anybody personally in this situation. So if he gave her an apartment to help with the conversion, is that wrong? Um, I think helping a convert materially is a mitzvah. You know, so I don't think the fact that if an apartment was provided to help a woman move from where she has no community to an area where there is a community, and this allows her to get the conversion, to be within walking distance of a synagogue, to be around other Jews who can provide not only a place to live, but money or anything that she needs. I don't think that in itself is wrong, unless that help is tied to personal exploitation. that would be a severe sin. Whether that occurred or not is the subject of the allegation, not something established. So, what about his wife? Is this considered adultery? If proven, then such behavior would be classified halakhically as adultery, which is among the three cardinal sins. But that category only applies after the facts are established. Until then, we can discuss halakhic framework, not the person. What if the roles were reversed? There's feminists in the comments section. I'm going to accuse of double standards. So halakhic categories do not change based on gender. Exploitation of a vulnerable student is prohibited either way. Adultery is asur, prohibited, regardless of who initiates it. Authority plus intimacy equals abuse of power in both directions. This symmetry allows us to teach principle, not personality. There was another claim made in the accusation that I want to bring up here, only because I'm a little hesitant to say it because I wasn't part of the conversation. I don't know what he told her in private. All I know is what she said. But this rabbi, uh, I converted to Judaism. I chose the name Yosef because this rabbi was very influential on me. So I'm very familiar with what he used to teach. And so when she brought this up, it definitely sounds familiar. But again, he teaches publicly. Lots of people are familiar with what he teaches. So just because she is familiar with things that he says doesn't mean he actually said this to her. It's public, the things that he says. But in this, and the reason I'm hesitant is because I don't want to spread something that's not true. I don't want to spread an accusation if it's not true. But I just want to address this because I think there's something that we can learn. So the allegation, I'm not saying it's true. The claim that she made publicly is that, as we mentioned, she quotes sources that says harlotry is not to be found among the people of Israel. She converted to Judaism. She's 100% Jewish, halakhically, 100%. She's a Jewish woman. As far as I know, I have no reason to doubt her. So allegedly, according to her, when she brought that up to him, his response is that something along the lines of there's no higher place in heaven than the place for those who make religious Jews become religious. And it's a very, very good thing to do. And I do believe there will be rewards for someone who can make a Jew or even non-Jews come to religion and connect to Hashem and bring Kedusha into this world. I think that's a very positive thing to do. I encourage almost everyone to consider converting to Judaism. So I know he does feel this way, and he has helped a lot of people connect to Judaism. It's a very honorable thing to do. But does that give him leniency? Does that mean Hashem is going to say, well, you did something wrong, but you did fulfill a lot of mitzvot. You did save my children. You brought my children who were drowning in a lake. You gave them the rope and got them out of the lake by bringing them back to Torah and mitzvot. Does that mean that if you did something wrong, you get leniency? That's a claim that she says that he made. I'm not saying he did say that. I wasn't there. What was said between these two individuals, I was not present. But I know that is something that he has taught in a similar way. Um, it was shown to me once a clip of him saying that he got, there was a clip where he claimed one thing which was not true, and they showed evidence that, hey, this claim that you made is not true. What do you have to say for this? Are you lying? And his response was, you know, what I said may not have been true. I'm paraphrasing here, but it gets people to become religious. And therefore, what we are doing is effective. And if we're making non religious Jews become religious by telling them something that's not true, the important thing is we're getting them to become religious. And the context was, there's people that when they come to religion based on what you told them, and then they later realize what you said was not true, they drop the religion because of it. Therefore, it's bad to misrepresent the religion, to lie to these people, to get them to become religious. And this was his response. If it's getting 80% of the people that we make religious become religious, we're not going to change our approach just because there's a smaller percentage that will say, well, you lied to me and that was dishonest, so now I'm going to drop the religion. So that shows me he has before um, acknowledged himself that it's okay to misbehave as long as we feel like we're doing a greater good by bringing people to religion. I think he was wrong for saying that. Um, so I was very disappointed to know that he himself admits to being dishonest to people who are trying to come to the religion. His goal is to get people who are already halakhically Jewish to become religious. But I think that applies also to converts. So I was very disappointed to hear him say that. And this was a video clip shown to me of him himself saying, separate from the accusation. So when she made the accusation that he told her he gets rewards for making people frum and that God gives him leniency, um, is that a valid Torah idea? Whether he said it, he didn't say it, I don't know. That's her claim. But is that a valid Torah idea? It's not a halakhic principle that kiruv, outreach, grants immunity from sins. Rambam is explicit. One mitzvah does not cancel another sin. So claims of theological exemption from consequences are manipulative theology, not classical halacha. So I wanted to just give my opinion on that. I think when people are coming to you to convert, they are in a state of vulnerability. Women, a different state than men, but as a man who converted myself, you feel an inferiority complex in that you don't know anything when you come to convert. You take this group of people and you put them on a pedestal. You assume that these are the best people with good intentions. And if not, if you suspect something is wrong, you don't know what to do about it. Who are you to say anything? You don't even know what to say. So that is why I think people who come to convert are in a state of vulnerability. And if you manipulate these people with dishonesty or anything else, I think that is a very serious problem. And it, this individual is not the only one that's been accused of it. There's another famous rabbi out there that all of you know. All of you know his name. He's been accused by multiple women. And I know his behavior has been excused because they like the work that he does, discrediting Christianity. A lot of people convert to Judaism because of what he teaches, and they're not, people are not so proud of his work because he gets converts. That's not his goal. His goal is not to get converts. His goal is to stop Christians from proselytizing to us. But a byproduct of doing that is people leave Christianity and then they go elsewhere to convert to Judaism. So the net result is a lot of people are converting to Judaism. And it's viewed as a positive, the things that he's doing. And so he's considered such a gadolim, these big rabbis, they're doing such good work that the knee-jerk reaction is to say, how dare you accuse him of doing something? Well, what if the accusations are true? Well, then it's lashon hara. You can't speak about it. And that's when silence becomes agreement. Now, I'm not saying that any of these rabbis are guilty of anything. I'm just saying everything that I've mentioned in this last hour or however long. So my advice to anyone who cares what I have to say, which is not many people, but my advice would be, if this situation comes up, just think about how you wanna comment on it. Is what you're saying gonna be harmful to either party, the person making the accusation or the person being accused? Making false accusations is a serious, serious crime also. Damaging people's reputation, slander, it's a big problem. Um, but at this point, there's an allegation, not a conviction. So I don't think you should say, well, he's a rabbi, so therefore, by default, the accuser must be slandering him. And I also don't think that she should be um, I don't think she should be automatically considered that what she's saying is true if no proof has been presented. And I'm not saying that she needs to provide proof. I'm not saying she needs to say anything. I'm not saying she needs to remain silent. There's a problem in this type of accusation that, if true, should be addressed. The only way that it gets addressed is if somebody comes forward and presents evidence. So that's my opinion on it. I don't feel obligated to take sides. Um, I had great respect for this rabbi in my own personal journey. At some point, I subscribed to this woman's channel, which means I viewed her as a good person that I could either learn from or benefit from being around. So I don't feel obligated to side either side. I do feel obligated, however, when I see people attacking both of them, either one of them. I don't think that's the proper way. And completely unrelated, I've been slandered and about not about this topic, but about a separate topic. And it's an area where I've seen, just because this has been going on recently, one individual called me a Hamas supporter. And when I told him, you can scour the entire internet, you will never find one comment anywhere where I said I support Hamas or I condone the behavior of Hamas or that I've excused anything that Hamas has done. When you call me a Hamas supporter, you have just slandered me. And in this situation, the individual saw what I said and he responded and didn't even address the fact that he slandered me. And when I said, you responded to when I told you slandered me, you didn't even have the decency to acknowledge that, yes, Rabbi, we disagree, but you're right. I did call you a Hamas supporter. There is no evidence to that. That is slander. I should not have done that. Wouldn't even acknowledge it. So, and this may be not just specific to Jews. Maybe this is just the human nature that people do this. But on that topic, he feels like if he's slandering somebody when there's no evidence, um, rules like Lashon Hara, Motzi Shemra, Rechilut, Sinat Hinam, none of this applies. He feels like he can behave in a way that if he saw anybody else behaving that way, he would call them out and say that behavior is inappropriate. But if it's on this particular topic, he feels justified. He doesn't owe an apology to anybody that he mistreated because he's slandering somebody that's on a topic that he feels passionate about. And I think outsiders, people that look at this, would look at that conversation and say, there's a problem here. You accused somebody of supporting a group which is a terrorist organization. If the Department of Justice looked at that conversation and said, this rabbi is a Hamas supporter, I would be investigated, potentially jailed. I mean, forget about if there was any real consequences for it. Just the accusation that I'm supporting a group, a terrorist organization that's killing my own people, that is a horrible accusation. And someone who doesn't take sides just reads the conversation and says, okay, well, you accused him of supporting that group. He says there's no evidence for that. Do you have any evidence? Not only was none provided, he doesn't even feel the need to apologize for making such a horrible accusation. I actually said, you know, I think this guy's a good guy. I actually said, why don't you take this Shabbat and think about if you treat people fairly on this topic? Because I think when it comes to controversial opinions, I think you do respect people who disagree with you on gay marriage, vaccines, abortion. I think when it's any other topic, you treat people who disagree with you fairly. But when it comes to this topic, I don't think you feel the need or the obligation to follow halakha and treat people with dignity and respect, fellow Jews. So I think you ought to think about that. So I come back after Shabbat, I get back online. It happens to be, there's his post talking about how we need to respect people who disagree with us. Because everyone is entitled to be treated with respect. But not me. Not someone who's accused of being a Hamas supporter. Okay. I don't hold grudges. I don't expect anybody to offer an apology for something that they don't feel was wrong. But it demonstrates there's people out there who feel it's okay to mistreat people. And that's what I saw in the comment section of this accusation. There's people who assume this woman who made the accusation that she's wrong. She should have known better. It was her fault. She knows how men behave. and therefore she should have never been around him. I think that's disgusting, especially someone who comes to a rabbi. The fact that you're a rabbi means already people are putting trust in you. There's one rabbi, you know, I don't care who you learn from. There's rabbis that I don't like. Go learn from them. I don't tell you not to learn from just because I disagree with them. But there are some rabbis, and there's one rabbi that I will tell you no one should learn from. He is so dishonest that people come to him trusting him because he's a rabbi. They assume that he cares about them and he's going to do what's best for them, and he lies to them, knowing that he's lying. I think that is so disgusting. That he's one of maybe three rabbis on this planet that I don't think anyone should learn from. So I think if you are so in love with this rabbi that's been accused, that I'm named after, that you think it's okay to attack this woman, I think you should really consider, is this one of your topics where you don't feel like halakha should apply to you? You don't feel like someone who deserves dignity, like the individual who accuses me of being a Hamas supporter feels like? Keep in mind, this woman is a convert. Even if the accusations are false, look at what Baba Metzia 59b says. If you cause this woman pain, even verbally, you will not be off the hook. If Hashem forgives you of other sins, you're going to be held accountable for how you treat this woman. And I also think the other way. If you think the rabbi is guilty, are you jumping to conclusions? How would you feel if somebody was slandering you and it wasn't true? You know, today you can build a case for anything. Well, we know your cell phone was here. You pinged off of this tower. You know, you can be made to look guilty of things that you're not guilty of. And people do make horrible accusations. People will accuse rabbis of being anti-Semites and Hamas supporters, even when the rabbi is someone like me, helps Zionists convert to Judaism and move to Israel. I can be slandered about things that are ridiculous by people who don't even feel that they should even acknowledge there was anything wrong with this type of slander. So I don't think we should be slandering the rabbi either. I think we should just be mindful. How does our comments look? How do we sound in this conversation? Do you want a reader who's not even Jewish, knows nothing about the situation, to say, look at how these Jews are talking about this woman. Look at how these Jews feel about rabbis, famous rabbis who have done a lot of good in the world for a lot of people. That's something that's really been bothering me lately. In fact, I'm actually kind of proud of myself that that's become one of my top priorities is how we treat each other. And it's unrelated to this topic. There's a lot of Jews that have been behaving in ways that are absolutely indefensible. Indefensible. And it really bothers me that when I've made mistakes and I've done things that were wrong and people pointed out to me, I was willing to say, you know what? You're right. I was wrong. In fact, I'm embarrassed that I didn't realize what I was doing was wrong at the time. But now that you pointed it out to me, my behavior was incorrect and I need to stop. I need to correct the course. And I'm very ashamed that many Jews are behaving indefensibly. And when you point it out to them, rather than to correct the course, their response is just to gaslight you into thinking you're the problem. How dare you point out what I'm doing, which is wrong? So agree, disagree, feel however you want. That's my take on it. I think we need to be mindful on how we treat each other on both sides of this situation and every situation. The world is watching. Everyone sees our how we treat each other, how we treat other groups, how we treat each other within our own group, which is obviously the problem, which I've talked about a little here. So that's my take on it. This just happened yesterday. Everything, more details will come out. Maybe it'll get buried and forgotten about, which is probably what we should be hoping for. So may Hashem grant healing to everyone involved.